Welcome to LFTF, the podcast about webinars and how they can supercharge your B2B marketing strategy. With me, as usual, Matthew Lay, president of the Streaming Network.
As always, Pete, thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. So we talk about all kinds of things webinar related. Obviously, that's what our show is about. One of the things we really want to dive into is how to get the most hits, how to drive new life into your pipeline through webinars. So I think it's a really important subject. We've touched on it. We probably touch upon it on every episode, but really to focus in on this as a thing. So let's just start. I mean, we talk about engagement, we talk about creating thought leadership webinars that are typically the best way to attract audiences. What types of webinars drive interest? What actually works if you're looking to just maximize your stats?
Well, at this stage, I don't think anyone's coming to us for the first time, but why thought leadership? Well, a webinar, unlike a lot of pieces of marketing content in a social age, is a big time investment for an audience member. And so if you're going to attract them out of the blue, so new blood into your pipeline, it's generally a mistake to get them into a sales demo or a demo environment at that stage, unless they've already, evaluated you to a certain extent. So thought leadership is usually what people do and is the right idea for how to drive new leads. If you're going to put marketing spend behind promotion, which we will talk about in a later episode, that's the stuff you want to be promoting, is you want to be promoting this thought leadership stuff to bring people in. So amongst the thought leadership topics, if you will, there are a few that we find perform really well for this sort of this new blood idea or new leads idea, or just general benchmark performance. So every year, quarterly or annually, we're sitting down with our customers and we're reviewing their programs. And so we get to see there's always one or two events that just their numbers are all higher than everything else. More registrants, more viewers, live and on demand. And so there's some things that you can steal from that. So the first one is research and unique insights. So in the financial services sector, there's always a economic update or an economic forecast. Something that we saw over the last 2 years that's performed really, really well, the Trump effect. Talking about the things that are going on in the United States that are going to affect Canada. Almost every financial services customer that we have, we look at those and we're like, wow, this killed all the other webinars that you were doing. It had broad-based appeal. It brought forward their own thought leader saying something that people wanted to hear. And sometimes it brought their a very, very unique perspective based around the type of business that they're in. The other one that does really well is your own research, right? So if you spend the time to do, like On24 does that benchmark study, or you do your own sort of diving into your own client base or whatever, and you've got your own research done, then you doing a webinar that basically shares that research with everyone is generally a fairly high performing webinar. If you had a third party help you do it, all the better. But those are two that if you can pull that out of your hat, you're going to have a webinar that's going to drive more people, and you can get some promotions behind and some ad spend behind.
Right. If it's of use to you, it's probably of use to your audience. It's value.
It's
real
value. It's real value in these cases, and it's what people are looking for, right? At that top level,
right.
It's insights they didn't have before, whether that's insights that you're giving them through your own studies, or insights from your top guy, your chief economist, or whatever it might be.
Right. Like any good B2B program, it's about your audience, not about you.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So the next thing is making it a bigger deal than it is. And the word here that we see work really well and what we've seen perform is summit. And a virtual summit can be one of many things. We have a product that's called a virtual virtual environment product where people do summits on, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about some different ways of pulling your thought leadership content together and into a summit style. So one summit style that works really well is getting 3 or 4 like-minded organizations together for one webinar. So if you might have 3 different software providers that all interact together. You might have 3 different professional services firms that operate in different aspects of whatever they're doing, and they come together and talk. So you're getting the marketing push of 3 organizations marketing the same event. You're bringing together usually 3 thought leaders instead of 1. So you got 3 times the reason. And you're telling a more holistic approach to whatever the topic is. So a customer of ours, Demand Metric, often webinars are part of what they do out to their massive base. And, depending on the topic, they get different numbers. But when they started doing these ABM summits, bringing in together all of the emerging ABM software technologies, their numbers skyrocketed. It was just a webinar. That's it.
Right.
No difference between any other webinar they'd ever done, except for they brought in these people and called it a summit. That's Summit version 1. And if you can pull those together, that's going to be another thought leadership webinar that's going to outperform your other ones. Summit 2 is, instead of doing a webinar, 3 Wednesdays in a month, do 3 webinars in 1 Wednesday. Whether they're live, pre-recorded, simulated live, we often see in this, but it doesn't matter, is you're putting all of your promotional might and everything else you're doing, ad spend, BDR, sales rep reach out, into one day. And there are 3 reasons for people to show up, 3 different webinar topics. So that single day summit is a powerful way to just get more people through what would have otherwise been, 3 single webinars. There's a bunch of stuff with the summit that we could get into a whole webinar on about the differences in what you need to do to maximize it. But in general, it will outperform. And then the final summit, which I saw it for the first time about 3 years ago, and I get it, and it really works well, is when you can bring together more topics or more webinars, whether they be ones you have in the can or new ones or more speakers, and you do a summit that spans 5 days. So it's 5 days of ABM strategies, 5 days of webinars, whatever it is, and you do 2 a day, maybe 3, but they're shorter, maybe an hour and a half, 30 minutes each or 20 minutes each or something. And you, again, promote to that week being the big deal. So Unbounce, who was a customer of ours, they did like a CMO week and all that stuff. And they just had different organizations and different webinars, pieced them all together and just pushed everyone through. And again, more successful than an individual webinar. You can't do those all the time, right? If you go the summit week, you're talking probably 1 a year, 2 a year. That would make sense. Even the summit itself, where you're bringing in 3 or 4 different like-minded companies, you may not have that many close relationships with people that you can make that happen with. But if you can apply a couple of these, you're really going to get a lot.
So basically, it's like Shark Week, right? I mean, you've got your programming through the year, but every once in a while you do that thing, that one big thing.
Shark Week is perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Shark Week is
Webinar Shark Week.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I've seen it done really, really interestingly with people in places where I didn't even think, right? A law firm of ours does a program in the summer where they rerun their CPD webinars on Fridays, 4 or 5 at once. And they spike the viewership all through by promoting that sort of that day, Shark
Right.
Day, or the TBS marathon, Star Wars marathon.
Right.
Gets more people watching Star Wars than if it's just on every Tuesday. So that's the same thing.
Right. It gets people interested. It gets people excited. You can do a big promotional push.
Yes.
And it separates the, you still want to be doing your regular touch point
That's
once
right.
a month, but whatever it is, and you pick probably around some other thing that's happening within your industry,
If possible,
and tie it
yeah.
in.
But it's getting excitement around something that is, it's not just another invite in my inbox about a webinar. It's a summit of this. It's Shark Week. It's whatever it might be. We should do webinar Shark Week.
That would not actually.
We have a lot of content now.
We should. That's actually a really good idea.
I think we should
Look for that.
get Taylor on that.
So just quickly, in terms of the stats you're looking to drive out of something like this, I mean, obviously viewership is key, but what are you looking to ultimately, you got to report back. We did this thing, boss, and this is why it worked. What are you looking at? Like, what are you trying to drive?
So I think in this case, this is just ideas for people who part of their webinar strategy is to get more new blood in. So in this case, unfortunately, the number is more. Right? You're doing thought leadership webinars already, probably, which means you've got some sort of promotional budget cadence work that's going into it. You know what the numbers are, but you're looking to ask these questions of us because you say, I want to get more in. So these are a few strategies. they're not necessarily this, like, the strategies about what's going to build the most pipeline. These are just new names in, and you're dating them, you're starting a relationship with them, and you want to move them through. So although I don't recommend putting a lot of ad spend behind mid to low funnel activities, because getting someone to go straight to that decision making process isn't an ideal scenario. There are a couple webinar formats that are good at driving more leads and more views, and can be used in this top of the funnel, even though they are dealing with what would be traditionally looked at as maybe consideration or consideration stage metrics. And that one is the how to or working case with a customer or partner there. So it's not just you talking about how, like us today, talking about how to get more people out. It's me and the guy from Demand Metric talking about how we get more people out through the summit format. And we go through the step-by-step of what he did, and so that they know how to do that. So they're not learning from the streaming network on how to do that. They're learning from Demand Metric, who did it and has actionable data that they can share.
Right.
So usually when you're doing the idea of doing something with a customer, you're providing social proof for people who are considering you as a vendor, service provider, platform provider, or you're looking for the credibility that comes with that to help explain why they should choose you over the guy that Demand Metric left. Like, they left GoToWebinar to work with us. So we want to show people who are on GoToWebinar how much better it can be on our platform. And there's something very different about us saying it than it is him saying it. So that one is a good, call it hybrid approach. But I don't think you should be thinking that way.
Right.
I think you should be thinking within your thought leadership series about how to get the most people in the door, the right people, and building up your top of funnel leads that are going to pay off, not today, but down the road.
Do you want to be thinking about these things in the same way, moving them down the funnel, creating something that's most generally interesting to the largest number of people, and then start to kind of get more granular as each subsequent iteration?
I like the way that your head is going, and quite often our thought leadership program, I find, and we do it too, because we do a lot of this stuff now, are reactive, right? So I think it's always best if you can create a plan, right? And I think at the top, you really want to create the most valuable, interesting and valuable message that is of the greatest value to the greatest number of potential prospects. So you can start getting them in and ABCing them into sort of what happens next. And the other part about a good thought leadership program is the following, right? Is that a television series used to be, back in the days of the before Netflix and on demand changed everything, the pilot was everything. And then after the pilot, if it sank, nothing really happened. And too often our webinars are like that. We do one, and then it didn't work. So we tried this. I tried this thing that Matt said to do about like a summit or this, and we had a poor turnout. Well, it could have snowed that day. It could have been other things were going on in the world, and it was just the wrong time. It could have been, there was a hiccup in the promotional. Who knows, right? It's just one, right? And then what HBO taught us when they stopped caring about pilots and they gave show orders to shows like Oz and The Wire, is that they could invest in something that they knew that there was a long-term strategy towards. And Netflix has taken that one step further, and they know now that if you get to episode 3, if you get through episode 3, you're going to watch the whole series. So they know which series they're going to drop and renew, not necessarily based around total viewership. They're going to do it based around how many people abandoned the show before episode 3. So I give you all of that context to say that your thought leadership program at the top, if you can, you should be thinking about it like a really good television program, right? So the opening salvo is a beginning and an introduction into what it is that you guys are doing. It doesn't necessarily need to be the best show of the year.
Right.
It's there. and the next one builds on it, and you know what your arc's going to look like. And it may be that these high level ones, you only do like 6 of them. Maybe what you really need this year, and we've been having this conversation a lot, is new pipeline in certain areas of your business, whether it be a new market segment, whether it be a new vertical. I don't know, right? But either way, you build a program like a podcast series that has a bit of an arc to it. It may not go from being super high level to super granular, but it takes them through all the things that you need to talk about within that space. And when you plan it that way, there's a trust level that comes from the build. People know what they're going to get. You tell them, next time I'm going to talk about this, and then you give them that. But to bring this full circle back to Netflix, the other thing that you want to think about is the binge side of this. Is if you've got thought leadership content that is built like a program, it's a lot easier for someone who had no idea who you were. They're coming to your website and they find your webinar because their boss said, Pete, you need to start learning about webinars and tell us if they're right for us and what we need to do and what goes into it. And if you have the right sort of program there, you could go to our website, you could watch, 4 or 5 or 6, whatever webinars, sort of make sense from that series. And progressively, you're going to be able to go back to your boss. But from our side, we've had you do what we want, consume a lot of our content.
So, and we approach this whole thing as if we're making a show. That's what we do.
That's right.
We're in show business.
That's right. That's what I tell my son.
So we have a studio, obviously, and lots of equipment. The ability to do that kind of planning.
Yeah.
A lot of our clients, though, it's a big challenge for them. To
it's
come
a
up with this sort of stuff.
You're right. I mean,
or they would feel going in that it's a big challenge.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So. First off, we are extremely lucky that we are in this business and that I could come in today, do all my meetings, and then me and you just walk downstairs into our studio and we do this. And we got Roberto and Catherine setting this thing up yesterday and they're ready for us, and it's quite easy. It's a much bigger deal. But let's take all of this out and let's think of this like it's just your run-of-the-mill webinar series, audio, webcam, whatever it is. I think the easiest way to do really good programs, whether they be completely top of funnel or vertical specific like this, is to plan out 6 pieces of content and go ahead and get them done in one go. The planning of content side of it is as much work whether you do it 6 separate months or in 1 week. Generally, these thought leadership series are based around content that you are already delivering, right? You're already got in a deck, you've already done it, whatever it is. They're things you're talking about all the time. And at larger organizations, it doesn't have to be like I'm the only guy that does it. It could be 3 or 4 different people, 5, 6 different people that you're doing it. But go in and get it sort of recorded. There's a bunch of benefits. So I'm wearing the same sweater in this podcast. And if you watch the last one, the one before that, and potentially the one before that, you'll notice that I'm wearing the same sweater.
That's because you have 5 of those sweaters.
I know that's what it seems, but it's not.
Oh.
It's the same day. But because we had a series of topics that we needed to get through, I know exactly what I talked about on the last podcast, right? So we're working from one podcast to another. I'm able to reference what's going on in those podcasts, and it makes sense for somebody who watches all of these back to back to back, consumes them, binges them, and that sort of thing. And that's the way a show is, right? There's a recap. There's what happened last week. You want to know, and that's why you watch the next episode. So I suggest that maybe you can't do it for the year, maybe you can, but depending on where you're at in your strategy, but you try to plan out a bunch of these thought leadership sessions. What are the things you're going to talk about? Get them done, get them recorded, and then you release them on a schedule later. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And then there's all kinds of other benefits to that, including you've got months, and we've talked about this, months and months of other types of content that you literally spend the afternoon and you're set for.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say this enough. I say it on every meeting almost. This is the best content strategy I ever had. I don't mind coming in here and talking. I don't mind you all that much as a person, so this is
appreciate
a good,
that.
that's
fine. Likewise.
Yeah, but like what we do from here is, and we got the lead time, right? So we got 5 or 6 of these done. They all go to transcription.
Yep.
They then can go into, a pipeline for blogs, a pipeline for this, a pipeline for editing. Like the next 2 months of my life are going to be, not focused on this at all.
Yep.
It's just going to happen.
So, and we're running out of time, but
Sure.
we want to talk about ROI. I think so you do a progressive program that generates ROI. What does that look like?
So the next stage in all of this is planning content. And if we're going to talk about webinars, which is what we talk about here, if you're is knowing what comes next after each webinar for somebody. So we talked about last time about having a call to action that allows people to be educate themselves on your product or service. So if your goal of your thought leadership program, which it should be, is to get people more engaged with your organization, after you do whatever piece, do you have a follow-up piece that is more middle or bottom of funnel that makes sense? Do you have maybe a more simplistic approach where it's getting everyone just to a demo and then I don't know what your thing is, but in general, do you have that next piece done? Because you should not only be just planning your thought leadership out this way, but it should coincide with your more detailed sort of stuff. Where this all gets bent on its back, and I see this all the time, we have this amazing example of a webinar. I'm not going to talk about what it is because we're in discussion about what to do and maybe kill the webinar series, but there's a company that does everything right with their program, the cadence, the use of the tool, everything that we said in our last webinar, basically almost everything they do. It's an amazing webinar to watch, but it's way too down the pipeline, being put way too early in the process with prospects, and the ROI is way less than what they would normally want to get. It is the most beautiful thing to happen after something else happens, which is what we talked about. And it is, and for you to start thinking that way for yourself from an ROI perspective is that you got this program driving that, then it's below it is what you really need to do to drive pipeline. So I know we're out of time. So then when we get back together, I do want to talk about the advantages of having all of this thought leadership content and all the things you can do with it inside the webinar program. So we usually talk about how to use it outside of it, blogs and videos, but there's things to do within it so that you can hit those goals that you want, which is what we heard from our audience was more. I need more people through.
Right. Sounds like a great subject.
Okay.
Great topic. Looking forward to exploring it. This has been LFTF, another great podcast. Matthew Lay, thanks so much. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to send us questions, and we'll see you again.